All right, so I bring that up because we will be talking about oaths today. We'll be talking more about truth and lies and what that looks like and what Jesus talks about when it comes to these things. And I remember when I was going through this, brought back this quote that has always stuck in my head, and it's a pretty famous quote, but I don't know if I'd ever heard it before. I was at Evergreen Golf Course. Might have been a year or two ago. I don't know if Kyle was with me or if Dan was with me or who was with me, but somebody was with me, and we just got done golfing, and we went into the clubhouse afterwards, and we're sitting there talking, and I run into my old athletic director from Silverton High School. All right, Mr. Terry Stahl, who I love. He's a great guy. And so I start talking to him, and we relive one of the worst moments in my life. And my sophomore year, during basketball season, the truth came out that I had been partying a lot and drinking, and everything came to the light, so I had to go into his office, and he questioned me about it. And in his words, he said, "You wept like a baby." And it was very true. But I told the truth to him, and he said this. He said, "A man is only as good as his word." And that really stuck with me. And I think that's a pretty popular saying, and it's a worldly thing, but it's really true. Okay? There is a lot. I think as we look at what Jesus says today, we're going to see the truth behind that today. It's all about integrity, who you truly are, what is your character. And so today, as we go into oaths, that's going to kind of be the backdrop here today, integrity. So let's go ahead and get into it. We're in Matthew 5. He says this, "Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, 'You shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn.' But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil." All right. So we got to do some digging here to understand what Jesus is talking about. So he said, "You have heard that it was said," and he said, "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn.'" That's not a direct quotation from the Old Testament in any way. It's a kind of a combination of a couple different passages. The first being Exodus 27, "You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain." That's the second commandment, of course. And we kind of think of that sometimes as just like cussing with the Lord's name involved or anything. But it goes so much deeper than that. It's taking an oath with the Lord's name. It's using God's name for political office, for your business, for any means that would not warrant it, to take it in vain, to help yourself in some way. So we have that. And then we have Numbers 32. "If a man vows a vow to the Lord or swears an oath to bind himself by a pledge, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth." Now, I want you to get there is that first word. He says, if a man makes a vow. Last one. Deuteronomy 23, 21 through 23. If you make a vow to the Lord your God, you shall not delay fulfilling it. For the Lord your God will surely require it of you, and you will be guilty of sin. But if you refrain from vowing, you will not be guilty of sin. You shall be careful to do what is past your lips, for you have voluntarily vowed to the Lord your God what you have promised with your mouth. And so an oath or a vow or anything like that is any promise we make, and we put God's name into it somehow. And what they used to do back in the day, they would say, by God, I will do this and that. And it's kind of like saying, under God's supervision, and may he harm me if I don't do this thing. He's bringing God into it. It's like this divine summons in a way. And so we see that God gave oaths. He allowed them in the Old Testament, but it was not something he commanded in any way. He didn't say they were necessary. It was kind of like divorce that we talked about last week, right? It's not how it was ever supposed to be, but he made allowances for divorce to help control a terrible situation that had got out of hand. And that's exactly what we see here with oaths. That, let's face it, why do you need an oath? Because people are liars, right? That's why we need oaths in the first place. And so God put these oaths in place to help discern what is truth and what is not. So people actually, when they made an oath, you could trust what they were saying, hopefully. But then we have the oaths and the Pharisees. And the Pharisees, they used oaths for everything. Like any simple thing, they would say, oh, by God, I will do this and do this. And just minor, stupid stuff, they would use these oaths. And they would use them to try and control people all the time. And they would say that lying, what really is at the center of the oaths, that's not really a sin unless you commit perjury or unless you made an oath. So you could say, I'll be there, I'll do this, I'll do that, but unless you made an oath, it's fine. That's how they would draw this distinction. You see what they did there? So they would do that. And then they would care more about the formula. That's why I've got that slide up there. They'd care more about the formula than the actual oath itself. And they'd say, if God's not involved, it's not an oath at all. Jesus actually talks about this in Matthew 23. So let's read this real fast. He says, he is not very happy here. Jesus sometimes was kind of mean to people. Woe to you, blind guides! You say if anyone swears by the temple, it means nothing, but anyone who swears by the gold of the temple is bound by that oath. You blind fools! Which is greater, the gold or the temple that makes the gold sacred? You also say if anyone swears by the altar, it means nothing, but anyone who swears by the gift that's on the altar is bound by that oath. You start to see what the Pharisees were doing here. You blind men! Which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? Therefore, anyone who swears by the altar swears by it and by everything on it. And anyone who swears by the temple swears by it and by the one who dwells in it. And anyone who swears by heaven swears by God's throne and the one who sits on it. So the Pharisees wouldn't even stop there. They'd make an oath and then they'd weasel their way out of it somehow by saying, well, it's only the gift. I swore by the altar, but it's only if you swear by the gift that's on the altar, right? And so they'd weasel their way out of these oaths that they had already made. And you see how they made God's law just easier and easier. So what is Jesus' teaching? What is Jesus' teaching on oaths? Well, the first thing is all oaths involve God. And we saw that there. God is everywhere. He is omnipresent. He's omniscient. He knows everything. He's omnipotent. He created the entire world. The entire earth. So no matter what you swear by on this earth, it all belongs to God. So you cannot get away from it. He says, no matter what you did, your oath is by God. And then he says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. And this was really shocking because oaths were so prevalent back in Jesus' day for him to say, stop doing oaths. Just let your yes be yes and your no be no. It makes sense to us today, but they were everywhere then. Basically saying, guys, why do you need an oath? If you are my disciple, why do you need an oath? Why should anybody want more than your yes or your no? You should have such integrity, such character, that all you need to say is yes or no. Now, you hear people, use God's name a lot. I swear to God. They say that. We shouldn't say that. That's not good. But what are some of the other things we hear? I swear by the hairs on my mama's head or something like that. But I got one for you that's kind of like, I bet you we've all said it. I promise. Somehow those two words are a little bit more than yes and no, aren't they? Like that's like I told you I'd do this and then I say I promise. And that's really what's wrong with me just telling you I'd do it. You see what Jesus is getting at? That would be our equivalent to that today. I promise. Like, oh, I'm really going to try to do it now. No. Jesus says, if you say something, say what you mean and mean what you say. You shouldn't have to add anything to it. And if a yes or a no is all it takes to make your point, then let that be all there is. So oaths today. Is it okay for us to take oaths? What do you think? Well, the Quakers, this is a Friends church. It's a Quaker church. I love the people here. They've been generous to us. They do not believe in oaths today. They don't. They will not go, as far as I understand, they will not go into a courtroom and take an oath or anything like that. So I don't agree with them, and I've got some biblical reason not to. So can you take an oath? I would say yes and no. For trivial, Dumb little things like the Pharisees? Absolutely not. You let your yes be yes and your no be no. But for major things like if you go into court, if you have to testify, marriage, you take a vow. A vow is very much like an oath. I'd say that's fine. Let's look at what Paul says. 2 Corinthians 1. Paul writes, I call God as my witness, and I stake my life on it, that it was in order to spare you that I did not return to Corinth. Here he is very seriously making an oath. He is making a vow. He is calling God as his witness. Hebrews 6:16. People swear by someone greater than themselves, and the oath confirms what is said and puts an end to all arguments. But because God wanted to make the unchanging nature of his purpose very clear to the heirs of what was promised, he confirmed it with an oath. Here it says that God makes oaths. But I think probably our most compelling evidence comes from Jesus. So Jesus goes on to trial, right? He is betrayed for 30 pieces of silver. He goes, and they ask him all these questions, and he doesn't say a word. Not the whole time. All these people are saying all these things, making all these false accusations. He just stays quiet until this. The high priest said to him, I charge you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God. You have said so, Jesus replied. But I say to all of you, from now on you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. The only time Jesus ever responded to him was under oath. Under the oath of the living God, and that's when Jesus comes out. So are there times? Yes. Okay? But when it can just be yes, let it just be yes. All right? Lying. This is the backbone of all this, right? We only have oaths because there's so much lying and deceit in the world. This is the bigger conversation. So I just want to look at a couple passages about lying, just to see where God stands on lying in general. Proverbs 12:22. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who act faithfully are his delight. No one who practices deceit shall dwell in my house. No one who utters lies shall continue before my eyes. It's Psalm 101. And then New Testament, Revelation 21. But as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, as for murderers, the sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death. And we have murderers in there, sexually immoral, sorcerers, and he lumps liars right on in with them. Now, he's not saying somebody who just slips up and lies one time. He's saying those who make a life of lying, right? They are living in persistent sin, lying and lying and lying. That's what he's talking about there. So, why do we lie? Well, I think one reason is to either protect or to promote ourselves. And lying is such a selfish thing. Generally, if you ever want to look at lie, you are at the center of your lies. To protect us, okay? So a little kid goes, steals a cookie right before dinner time, a chocolate chip cookie. Okay? Knows he's not supposed to have a cookie right before dinner. Mom and Dad walk in. He's got crumbs all over him. He's got chocolate smeared on his face. Did you get a cookie? No. Are you sure you have crumbs all over your face? No, I told you. You have chocolate in your hair. No, I didn't have a cookie. He gags and a piece of a cookie comes out of his mouth. No! Why is he lie? So he doesn't get in trouble. He's protecting himself. And I have a confession to make. Okay. So this is a story from this week. I told you how you preach on something, just wait for it to come back to your life. I have been, for the last couple months, doing paperwork and trying to become a personal support worker for one of my old students. So I can go around with him and I get paid for it and just to help him out, and it's be a great deal. And so anyway, I haven't been the best with my paperwork. A lot's been going on in the past couple of months. I've been slack, okay? No excuse. All right, but finally I got some stuff done. I got it all in, and this is the third round of paperwork I've had to do. It's just over and over again. And I finally got all the signatures I needed, and I've got it there. I take it home. I go to scan it, and the computer doesn't work. So it's sitting on top of the printer. Okay, that's this week. Friday, I go to Costco. I got the day off work. I'm at my favorite place, Costco. Happiest place on earth. And I'm just walking. I think I was in like the walnut aisle, maybe somewhere in there. And the student's dad just comes out of nowhere. He comes up to me. And I love the guy. He's a great guy. I've known him for a long time. I taught his kid for 3 years. And comes up and we start talking. Right? Hey, you get that paperwork in? I looked right at him. I said, yep. And it was seriously just like slow motion, like an arrow just right into my heart. Because all I've been studying all week was this. And I, even if I hadn't been studying it all week, it would have been the same thing. And I talked to him for like 5 minutes after that, but I don't know what was said. Because the whole time I'm just like, oh, Brian, what are you doing? Do you go back now? Do you go back and just say, I'm sorry, I'm a liar? Do you do that? And I was like, well, no. How about you just confess it to about 40 people sitting around on Sunday? Great. You know? Why'd I do that? Because I cared about what he thought about me, of his perception of me. And so much so, that's what lying is about. And really, when it comes down to it, in that moment, I cared more about his perception of me than I cared about what God thought about what I was doing. And so many times, that's what lying is. We care more about what people think of us than what God thinks. Next, promote ourselves. So that's protect ourselves, promote ourselves. Any type of exaggeration is self-promotion, right? Exaggeration is, is it a lie? I don't know, but it's deceitful, right? And I lump lies and deceitfulness in the same thing. Why do you say you caught a fish this big when it was really that big? Because you want everybody to think, oh, look at this great fisherman who caught this great fish. Awesome, right? It's all about me, me, me. They want others to think more highly of us. And in the end, again, we care more about others' perception than what is right by God. Next, to help our cause. Cheat on your taxes. Why do you do that? Well, to get money, to help yourself, right? Deceiving people. If you own a business and you deceive people to make more money, why do you do that? To help yourself. What about this one, okay? Maybe you guys haven't done those things. Those are pretty big ones, right? What about calling in sick to work? When you're not sick at all, you really just want to go hang out with some friends. Been there, done that. But I do it to help my cause because it's what I want. And in that moment, I care more about what I want than what God has said is right for my life. And guys, I'm like, I don't know what you all do for business, but like I am sick of hearing of people, Christian people who claim to be Christians, who have just done people over money. I'm so sick of it. It should never happen ever. Ever. Because what are you showing there? What does your heart say there? I care more about worldly riches than the life to come. Care much more about that than heavenly riches. That's what your heart shows. Our action always shows our heart. Our actions don't lie most of the time. Sometimes, but most of the time, your actions will show your heart. And I'm just so sick of hearing that. It should never happen. And our nature. Why do we lie? Our nature. John 8:44. Jesus is talking to the scribes and the Pharisees, and he says, "You belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies." Oh man, this world that we live in right now is so crazy. I don't know if there's ever been a time, and I've studied quite a bit of history where truth has been under such fire. I had a student, a really good student, a couple years back. He's a super smart kid. And we were talking about math. And I basically told him I hate math, but you know the one thing I like about math? 2 + 2 will always be 4. I like the constancy of it. And he looks at me. He's not kidding. He says, unless our perception of 2 + 2 changes, and then it will not be 4 anymore. And I looked at him, and I said, you know what? Sometimes you can be so smart that you're actually stupid. And I don't know. I probably shouldn't have said that. We had a relationship, though, so I could say those things to him. But we live in a world that is getting rid of objective truth. There's subjective truth. I can have my truth. You can have your truth. As long as it doesn't mess with my truth. And if our two truths don't coincide, well, who cares? It's still my truth and your truth. Who cares about what's actually true, right? That's our world today. That is the world we live in. I don't know, have you guys heard of modernism and postmodernism, what that is? So it's like kind of like a philosophical ideal, kind of like a worldview in a way. And so they said for like late 19th century up into the late 20th century, we lived in modernism. And everybody has different dates on this. But generally modernism, what was really big was rational thought and reason and science. It was huge, and it was believed that science and reason and all these things are going to solve all the problems of the world. Through science, we're going to see that there was never really any God, and then we can get rid of this whole religion thing, and now we can actually all be at peace with each other, right? And that was the thought. But then the 20th century passed by, and what did we have? World War I, World War II. Now we can destroy the whole entire earth in a matter of hours if we want to with the technology we have. And so, at the end of the 20th century, we look back on that, and we're like, we're no better off than we were then. Nothing has changed. So now we have taken this giant leap in the exact opposite direction where it doesn't matter. Reason is dead. It doesn't matter. Truth is dead. There's no objective truth. What really matters is my feelings and what I feel. And you see it everywhere in the world today in everything. Doesn't matter. If I feel like I want to be something, that's what I am. Because it all comes down to my feelings. Nothing else. Time magazine published this in 2016. In 1966, they came out with Is God Dead? In 2016, they came out Is Truth Dead? Because they saw the way that this world is with fake news and everything else. What is real, what is not. Can't even trust the news to be true these days. What is true? You just don't know. That is the world we live in today. So I ask you, is it ever okay to lie? Is it ever okay to lie? Let's start with white lies. Are they okay? I don't want to hurt someone's feelings. I just tell a little lie. Right? No. It's not okay. If we've learned anything from this whole discussion on murder and adultery and everything else that we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, it's that sin is a process. Sin is a process. And I'll tell you what, if I'm around someone who tells a lot of white lies, I'm not going to trust them when it comes to the big ones. The more you tell those little lies, the much more able you're going to be to tell the big ones when it actually matters. And we talk about adultery and murder, and all those things start with lies. I was watching a documentary on John Bundy. That guy, he was a serial killer. That guy was the biggest liar of all time. He was a pathological liar. It's just insane how all these things work together. I think as Christians, we just need to be people who give honest answers in love. Don't be a jerk about it. Someone says, hey, do you like my haircut? Don't say, well, it'll grow back. That's good. Yeah, don't be a jerk about it. But why can't we just be people that somebody, when they actually want an honest opinion and not just somebody to tell them what they want to hear, they come to us to give them an honest answer? So, is it ever okay to lie? Yes. Biblical answer, yes. Joshua 2. We have a prostitute named Rahab. All right. God has told the Israelites, send spies into Jericho in order to spy it out so you can take that city. And so they go in. It's found out that there's spies in Jericho, and this Rahab takes them in, hides them. The authorities come to her and say, hey, give over those men that you have. Where are they? And she's like, they left town. I saw them leave past the gate. And she hides them. She lets them escape through her window. The rest of the Bible points to Rahab and says she was a great woman of faith for what she did. If you were living in Poland in the mid-1940s and you were housing Jews in your attic and Nazis came to your house and said, "Are you housing any Jews here?" Absolutely, you should lie about that. All right? At some point, people get to that, whether it's Nazis or people trying to find these spies, you get to that point where you don't deserve the truth. You don't get it because your motives are wrong. So can I tell you when you should lie and when you should? No. You should hardly ever lie. And if somebody's life is in the balance, then maybe you should lie. But maybe that's it. There's no formula here to figure out when it's okay to lie. It's not okay to lie, except if someone's life is in the balance. Let's just say that. Okay. But fine line there. All right. So, the truth about lying. So, we need to look at a couple different truths to help us see what lying is, what it actually is. So, first truth, you are always in God's presence. All the time. When I was at Costco, I was in God's presence. And we should do and say what we would do if God were right next to us in everything we do. Because you know what? He is. He is everywhere, and He knows everything. And generally, all sin is against God and God alone. When I lied to that man's face, I wasn't sinning. I didn't feel bad for sinning. I sinned against God. That's what sin is. It's against Him. It's rebellion against Him and His will. And that's exactly what I did. Lying in prisons. The Bible paints this picture of those who walk in lies and falsity are in the darkness, while those who live by the truth are in the light. And one lie always leads to another. And what do you have to do to cover up that lie? You need to lie again and again. And every time you lie, it's like you're stepping into a shadow. And before you know it, all you know is the darkness. Because that's your life. You are living a giant lie. It imprisons us. There is no freedom there whatsoever. There's a song lyric by a band I like, and it's something to the effect of, you can't keep living in shadows and not belong to the darkness. If you want to wander around in the shadows long enough, you will belong to the darkness. Next, hard to lie if there's nothing to lie about. What I'm saying by this is, watch how you live. Goes back to our talk of, if your eye causes you to sin, gouge it out. If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Be proactive. Stop sinning. You know that boy, the boy with the cookie, he wouldn't have to lie if he never ate the cookie in the first place. I wouldn't have had to lie to the man if I just would have done the paperwork when I should have. And I just got it done, right? You don't have to lie about pornography if you don't watch porn. You don't have to do these things, right? So watch your actions first and foremost, because it's when we do the things we know we shouldn't do, that's when we lie about them and deceive others into thinking we're not doing them. And again, God tells you, just come back to it. It's not, don't do this, don't. God just tells you not to do certain stuff because He knows it's stupid and it's going to hurt you. And He loves you and He wants the best for you. All right. You are ambassadors of Jesus Christ. John 14:6, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And as a Christian, you are an ambassador of Jesus. You are His representative to this earth. Not only that, but if you are a Christian, you are filled with the Holy Spirit, who is also called the Spirit of truth. And so when we go out and when we lie and when we are dishonest, we are not being a very good representative, are we? We actually resemble Satan a whole lot more when we lie than we do Jesus, the father of lies. And so, because of that, what you say and what you do matters greatly. You represent Jesus to this world. What an honor, but what a responsibility too, right? And we are watched by God 24/7. And you are watched by the outside world 24/7 too. There are people you work with, people you go to school with, that if you identify as a Christian, you might be the closest thing they've ever known to Jesus Christ. And that's the truth. And so if you want to be dishonest, and you want to lie, and you want to misrepresent Him, think of the effects there. The only Christian I ever knew, the only ambassador of Christ I ever knew, lied just as much as those people who claimed to know nothing about Him. As one of the greatest things that people say about the church is you're hypocrites. And I can't blame a lot of people for saying that. We have represented Jesus Christ very, very poorly. Thank God for His grace and His mercy. But we are to be people of integrity. And I want you guys to know, watch your behavior, watch your actions. Don't be in here one day praising God with your arms in the air and then go call into work sick and lie to Him about something. Do you see how that does not flow together? Be who you say you are. I want to end tonight back at Jesus. This is in John 18. Jesus is being questioned by Pontius Pilate, a high-ranking Roman official. And I'm going to pick it up in verse 33. He's questioning him. He says, Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea?" Jesus asked, "or did others talk to you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it you have done?" Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place." "You are a king then?" said Pilate. Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." "What is truth?" retorted Pilate. And that is the world today. What is truth? And we get the job of going out into that world and say that truth came down 2,000 years ago in a man. And we get to live out His teaching as we continue to go through it here today. All of life's major questions that you have find their answer in Jesus. What is my purpose? Why am I here? That's why He's the truth. Everything finds its answer in Jesus Christ. He is the answer and the truth. He said in John 8, to the Jews who had believed Him, Jesus said, "If you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." And what I'm here to tell you guys is, if you have been living in the shadows, in the darkness, there is so much freedom when you come into the light, when you have nothing to hide anymore. I lived how many years? I don't even know how many of my years I lived in the darkness, just pure darkness. Doing everything I shouldn't and lying all the time. And then when I finally just gave it all to Him, and He started working on me, and I got to that place where I had nothing at all to hide. Some of you probably can't even think of what that might even be like right now, but it's possible. The freedom that you have. I remember just one day driving and the sunlight hit me, and it was like, somehow I thought about the light just hitting me and there's nothing to hide here. And I just wept driving my car because God had done all of that. And it all starts with trusting in Jesus, who is the way, He is the truth, and He is the life. So let's pray.